Get off my plane right now!
You just made the biggest mistake of your career.
Mom, I'm going to ask you one last time. Get out of that seat, or I will have security remove you. Captain Thomas Whitaker stood in the aisle of first class, with his arms folded across his chest. His voice was not loud enough to be called shouting, but it was loud enough for every passenger in the cabin to hear. The cabin went still. Olivia Bennet sat in seat 2A, near the window, her hands resting lightly in her lap. She was 47 years old, dressed in a navy blazer, cream blouse, and dark trousers. No flashy jewelry, no assistant beside her, no title hanging around her neck. To Thomas Whitaker, she looked like a problem. To Diane Parker, the lead flight attendant standing behind him, she looked like someone who had been caught. Diane kept her hands folded at her waist. Her lips held a small, careful smile, not kind, not nervous, satisfied. Olivia looked up at the captain. "I am not in the wrong seat," she said. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. A man in row 4 lifted his phone just a little higher. Across the aisle, a woman lowered her magazine but pretended she had not. In seat 2B, an older businessman shifted his briefcase closer to his shoes, as if distance could protect him from discomfort. Captain Whitaker glanced down at Olivia's boarding pass, which Diane had not returned. "Our crew has already checked the cabin manifest," he said. "This seat is showing as unassigned." Olivia took one slow breath. "The boarding pass says seat 2A. The gate scanner accepted it. I paid for this seat. I boarded correctly." Diane stepped forward. "Mom, the captain is trying to help you avoid a bigger scene." The words sounded polite. The tone did not. Olivia turned her eyes to Diane. She noticed the tight jaw, the controlled breathing, the practiced face of someone who had spent years deciding which passengers deserved warmth and which deserved suspicion. "I would like my boarding pass back," Olivia said. Diane did not move. Captain Whitaker's mouth tightened. "That is not the issue right now." "It is part of the issue," Olivia replied. "Your flight attendant took my boarding pass and placed it in her tablet case. She has not returned it." A ripple moved through the cabin, not loud. Just a shift, shoulders tightening, eyes turning, people realizing they had missed something important. The captain leaned closer. "Mom, this aircraft cannot depart with an unresolved passenger issue in first class." Olivia held his gaze. "Then resolve it properly." For the first time, Thomas Whitaker hesitated. He had been flying for more than 30 years. He knew turbulence, mechanical delays, angry passengers, medical emergencies. He knew how to sound steady when other people were afraid. But he did not know what to do with this woman. She was not yelling. She was not apologizing. She was not shrinking. She simply sat there, steady as stone. "Captain," Olivia said, "please call dispatch. Ask them to verify the seat assignment against the central reservation system." Diane's smile faded. The man in row 4 stopped pretending to hide his phone. A young woman across the aisle looked up sharply. She knew that phrase, central reservation system. Ordinary passengers did not usually say things like that. Whitaker's face hardened. "I do not need to call dispatch." "Yes," Olivia said softly. "You do." The air changed. Somewhere behind them, a seatbelt clicked. A passenger whispered, "Oh my God." Whitaker heard it. Diane heard it. Olivia heard it too. But Olivia did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the captain, and in that quiet moment, with the whole cabin watching, she understood something painful. This was not only about a seat. It was about every person who had ever been asked to prove they belonged in a place they had already paid for. Every traveler who had swallowed humiliation just to get home. Every quiet apology that had never been given. Captain Whitaker straightened. "I am the final authority on this aircraft." Olivia nodded once. "Then use that authority carefully." His face flushed. Diane leaned toward him and whispered, "Security can be here in 2 minutes." That was when the cabin stopped breathing. Thomas Whitaker looked down at Olivia Bennet and made the decision that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Call them," he said. Diane reached for the interphone. Olivia did not move. Her hand slid slowly toward the slim leather portfolio beneath the seat in front of her. No one in that cabin knew what was inside. Not the captain. Not Diane. Not the passengers filming from 3 different angles. And certainly not the people who had already decided that Olivia Bennet did not belong in seat 2A. Diane's fingers hovered over the interphone for 1 second too long. It was not hesitation from mercy. It was hesitation from instinct. Somewhere inside her, under the pressed uniform and the years of practiced authority, a small warning light had begun to blink. Olivia Bennet was too calm. Most passengers pleaded when security was mentioned. They explained too much. They reached for receipts, credit cards, status numbers, anything that might prove they were worth believing. Olivia did none of that. She sat still, her eyes fixed on Captain Whitaker, her hand resting near the leather portfolio like it held nothing more dangerous than a notebook. "Diane," the captain said. His voice snapped her back. She lifted the interphone. "Gate operations. This is lead flight attendant Parker on North Star Flight 1142. We need ground security at the forward boarding door." The words traveled through the cabin like cold air. A woman in row 1 pressed a hand to her mouth. The businessman in 2B looked down at his shoes. He had watched the whole thing from 3 feet away. He knew Olivia had not raised her voice. He knew Diane had kept the boarding pass. He knew the captain had not checked dispatch, but knowing was easier than speaking. That was the quiet shame of the cabin. Not cruelty, not all of it. Fear, convenience. The hope that someone else would do the right thing first. Across the aisle, Rachel Coleman held her phone low against her leg. She was 31, a civil rights attorney from Oakland, flying home after a deposition in Atlanta. Her hand was steady, but her chest was tight. She had seen this rhythm before. A polite question becoming suspicion, suspicion becoming accusation, accusation becoming removal. She angled the camera toward Olivia's face, not to exploit her, to protect the record. Captain Whitaker stepped closer. "Mom, when security arrives, you will gather your belongings and exit the aircraft peacefully." Olivia looked at him with a patience that made him angrier. "Captain, there is still time to handle this correctly. There is nothing to handle. There is everything to handle." Diane lowered the interphone and turned back, her face smooth again. "They're on their way." A faint murmur passed through first class. Someone whispered that the flight would be delayed. Someone else said Olivia should have just moved. The words were small, but they landed. Olivia heard them. She did not flinch. Instead, she thought of the complaints on her desk. The grandmother in Detroit, the young father in Dallas, the veteran in Phoenix who had been asked 3 times if he was sure he had priority boarding. Each story had arrived in careful language. I felt embarrassed. I felt singled out. I did not want trouble. Those were the words people used when pain had been trained to sound polite. Olivia had read every line. She had signed off on the review herself. She had hoped this flight would prove the pattern was not as deep as it looked on paper. Now she knew. Paper had been too kind. In seat 2B, the older businessman finally moved. His name was Charles Morgan, 68 years old, retired school superintendent. A man who had spent his life watching rooms decide who mattered and who did not. He cleared his throat. "Captain." Whitaker turned, irritated. "Sir, please remain seated." "I am seated," Charles said. His voice was low, but it carried. "And from this seat, I have watched that woman comply with every reasonable request made of her." Diane's eyes sharpened. "This does not concern you, sir." Charles looked at her then, not with anger, with disappointment. That is what people always say right before something shameful becomes normal. The cabin went silent again. Rachel's phone captured it all. Whitaker's jaw worked once. "Sir, I'm asking you not to interfere with crew duties." "I am not interfering. I am witnessing." The words struck harder than a shout. Olivia turned slightly toward Charles. For the first time since the confrontation began, something softened in her face. Not relief. Recognition. One person had stepped into the space everyone else had abandoned. Charles continued, "I would also like to know why my boarding pass was not checked a second time. Nor his, nor hers, only hers." No one answered. Diane's hands tightened around her tablet case. Captain Whitaker's face began to redden above the collar. "That is enough." "No," Olivia said quietly. Everyone looked back at her. She reached down and took the portfolio from beneath the seat. Slow, careful, visible, Diane stiffened as if a weapon might appear. But Olivia only laid the portfolio on her tray table and opened the clasp. The sound was soft. Click. Small, final. Captain Whitaker stared at her hands. Olivia removed one sheet of paper and placed it face down. Then she looked up. "Before security reaches that door, Captain, I am going to give you one final chance." Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. "Call dispatch. Return my boarding pass. And state, clearly, why you are removing a paying passenger from her assigned first-class seat." Whitaker swallowed. Behind him, at the open aircraft door, 2 uniformed security officers appeared in the jet bridge. Diane saw them and exhaled. She thought help had arrived. Olivia knew the truth. So had accountability. The 2 security officers stopped at the aircraft door and looked into first class. They had expected noise, a drunk passenger, a shouting match, someone refusing to sit down. Instead, they saw a quiet woman in seat 2A, a captain standing too close to her tray table, and a cabin full of passengers holding their breath. Officer Paul Jenkins was the first to step inside. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, with a tired face and careful eyes. His partner, Officer Maria Alvarez, stayed half a step behind him, scanning the cabin the way trained people do when a room feels wrong. "Captain," Jenkins said, "what seems to be the issue?" Thomas Whitaker answered quickly. "This passenger is refusing crew instructions. We need her removed so we could continue boarding and depart." Olivia did not look at the officers. She looked at the captain. "That is not a complete statement," she said. The sentence landed clean and sharp. Diane Parker let out a small breath through her nose. She wanted this over. She wanted Olivia walking up the jet bridge, head lowered, while everyone else returned to their drinks and phones and schedules. That was how these things usually ended. But this was not ending. Officer Alvarez looked at Olivia. "Mom, are you refusing to leave the aircraft?" "I am refusing to leave my assigned seat without a verified reason," Olivia said. "I have a valid boarding pass for seat 2A. It was scanned at the gate. The boarding pass is currently in Ms. Parker's possession, though I have asked for it back more than once." Alvarez's eyes moved to Diane. Diane's lips parted. "I was holding it for verification." "Then return it," Alvarez said. The request was simple, professional, neutral, but it cracked something. Diane's fingers tightened around the tablet case. For the first time, the passengers saw it clearly. Not confidence, not authority, fear. Captain Whitaker turned his head slightly. Diane. She opened the front pocket with stiff fingers and removed the folded boarding pass. The paper trembled just enough for Rachel Coleman's camera to catch it. Diane handed it to Olivia. Olivia accepted it and placed it on the tray table without a word. No thank you, no smile. Just the clean silence of a courtesy not owed. Charles Morgan watched from across the aisle. His eyes were wet now, though he would later deny it. He had spent decades teaching children that fairness was not a feeling. It was a practice. You had to do it when it cost you something. You had to do it when the room went quiet. Officer Jenkins took one step closer. "Mom, may I see the boarding pass?" Olivia handed it to him. He read it. Then he looked at the captain. "This says first class." Seat 2A. Whitaker's face stiffened. "Our manifest shows a discrepancy. Did you verify with dispatch?" The question was mild. The damage was not. Whitaker did not answer. Jenkins looked at him a little longer. "Captain, I made a judgment call based on information from my lead flight attendant." Olivia turned over the sheet of paper on her tray table. It was not dramatic. There was no gasp at first. No music. No sudden movement. Just paper sliding across polished plastic. The North Star Airways letterhead caught the cabin light. Captain Whitaker's eyes dropped to it. His expression changed into pieces. First irritation, then focus, then confusion, then recognition. His mouth opened slightly. The memo was dated 3 days earlier. It concerned the quarterly review schedule for senior flight officers. Beneath the subject line was a short list of names. Thomas Whitaker was one of them. Beside his name was a note. Pending review of open passenger service complaints and procedural escalation reports. At the bottom of the page was a signature. Olivia Grace Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. Diane saw the captain's face before she saw the document. That frightened her more than the paper itself. Thomas? She whispered. He did not answer. He read the signature again, as if a second look might make it change. It did not. Olivia folded her hands in her lap. Captain Whitaker, she said, her voice low and steady. You were correct about one thing. Authority matters on an aircraft. That is why it must be used with discipline. No one moved. Even the officers stayed still. Whitaker swallowed. Miss Bennett, there it was, the name, the truth. The cabin seemed to tilt around it. Diane's face went pale. Rachel's phone kept recording. Charles closed his eyes for 1 second, not in triumph, but in grief. Because justice had arrived, yes, but only because the woman in the seat had power, and everyone in that cabin knew what might have happened if she had not. Cancel security, Captain Whitaker said. His voice was low now, lower than before. Not commanding, not steady, just thin. Officer Jenkins looked at him. Captain? Whitaker did not take his eyes off Olivia. Cancel the removal request. Diane turned toward him as if she had misheard. Captain, they're already here. I said cancel it. The words cut through her. Officer Alvarez glanced from Whitaker to Olivia, then to the document on the tray table. She understood enough to step back. Jenkins did the same. Neither officer wanted to become part of a mistake that was still unfolding in public. Diane lifted the interphone again, with fingers that no longer obeyed her cleanly. Gate operations, she said, her voice strained. Cancel security response for North Star Flight 1142. No removal needed. The officers exchanged a look. Jenkins gave Olivia a small nod. It was not an apology. He had not caused the harm, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes acknowledgement was the first stitch in a torn moment. We'll clear the doorway, he said. Olivia nodded once. Thank you, officer. The officers stepped back into the jet bridge. The cabin door remained open. Cool airport air drifted in, carrying the smell of coffee, fuel, and morning rain from the Atlanta ramp. Inside first class, no one spoke. Diane stood by the bulkhead, holding the interphone like a lifeline. Her face had changed. The careful smile was gone. So was the confidence. What remained was a woman suddenly forced to meet the full weight of her own choices. Captain Whitaker cleared his throat. Ms. Bennett, he said, I want to apologize for the confusion. Olivia looked at him for a long second. The apology sat between them. Small, late, carefully shaped to protect the person who gave it. The confusion was created when procedure was ignored, Olivia said. You had a way to verify the seat. You chose not to use it. Whitaker's mouth tightened, but he did not argue. He could feel the phones on him. Rachel Coleman in 2C. The man in row 4. Someone behind the curtain near the first row of economy. Every lens was a mirror, and none of them were kind. Olivia continued. You accepted an assumption as fact. Then you used your authority to pressure a passenger into surrendering a seat she paid for. That is not confusion, Captain. That is a failure of judgment. A muscle moved in Whitaker's jaw. Yes, Mom. The words came out stiff, trained, painful. Olivia leaned back slightly. Her hands were still folded. Her face was calm, but there was grief under the calm now. She was not enjoying this. That was what made the moment heavier. Power used for revenge is easy to recognize. Power used with restraint is harder to look at. Return to the cockpit, she said. We still have passengers to get to San Francisco. Whitaker blinked. For a second, pride rose in him. The old reflex. The need to take back the room. Then he looked at the memo again, and the pride collapsed. Yes, Ms. Bennett. He turned and walked forward. His shoulders were still squared, but the shape of him had changed. The 4 stripes on his sleeve no longer looked like certainty. They looked like fabric. As he passed Diane, he did not look at her. That hurt her more than she expected. Diane remained frozen until Olivia spoke. Ms. Parker. Diane turned. Yes, Ms. Bennett. The name tasted unfamiliar in her mouth. It exposed everything she had not known. Please continue boarding. Diane nodded too quickly. Of course. And please remember, Olivia said, every person who walks through that door is not an interruption to your work. They are the reason your work exists. Diane's eyes flickered. For one brief second, something human broke through the fear. Not transformation. Not yet. But recognition. Yes, Mom, she whispered. Across the aisle, Charles Morgan lowered his gaze. Rachel Coleman stopped recording, but did not put her phone away. She knew better. Moments like this did not end when the loud part ended. The cabin began to breathe again. A suitcase rolled down the aisle. A child asked his mother why everyone was so quiet. Somewhere near the galley, Diane welcomed the next passenger with a voice that shook on the first word, then steadied on the second. Olivia placed the memo back inside her portfolio. Then she looked out the window at the gray Atlanta sky. She thought of every complaint that had crossed her desk with careful words and buried pain. Today, one story had been stopped before it became another closed file. But Olivia knew the truth. One corrected moment was not justice. It was only the beginning. Boarding finished 7 minutes later. The cabin door closed with a dull mechanical thud. No applause, no chatter. Just a strange silence that lingered over first class like a storm cloud that had not quite decided to leave. Diane Parker moved through the aisle performing her duties. Seatbelts, overhead bins, safety checks. She had done these motions thousands of times. Today they felt different. Every time she passed row 2, she could feel the eyes. Not just Olivia's, everyone's. The businessman in 2B no longer avoided looking at her. Rachel Coleman watched quietly. Even passengers who knew nothing about the details sensed something had happened. Shame has a way of changing the temperature of a room. Up front, behind the cockpit door, Captain Whitaker sat motionless for several seconds before beginning the departure checklist. His first officer, Daniel Brooks, glanced over. "You okay?" Whitaker stared at the instrument panel. No, it was the most honest thing he had said all morning. Daniel waited. "We can call operations if you need a minute." Whitaker shook his head. No, because he knew what would happen next. There would be reports, statements, video, witnesses, records. Every decision had left a footprint, and now all of those footprints led directly back to him. The aircraft pushed back from the gate. Outside, rain streaked across the windows. Inside, Olivia sat quietly. She was not answering emails, not making calls, not preparing speeches. She simply watched the airport drift away. The terminal, the service vehicles, the baggage carts, people moving through ordinary lives. For a moment, she thought about Harold Mitchell, the older gentleman with the cane, the one she had seen at the gate, the one Samuel Reed had pulled aside for extra verification. A small knot tightened in her stomach. She already suspected what she would discover later, that Harold had missed the flight entirely. Not because of a security concern, not because of a documentation problem, because someone had decided he looked like a problem. The aircraft lifted into gray clouds. A few minutes after takeoff, Diane approached row 2 carrying a tray. Her hands were steady now, not because she felt better, because there was nothing left to hide behind. "Would you care for breakfast, Miss Bennett?" Olivia looked up. Diane's voice was professional, careful, controlled. But underneath it was fear, real fear. Olivia could hear it. She accepted the menu. "Thank you." The words surprised Diane. Not because they were kind, because they were normal. Olivia could have humiliated her, could have made a speech, could have reminded everyone who she was. She did none of those things. The restraint hurt more. Diane nodded and moved away. Across the aisle, Charles Morgan leaned toward Olivia. "May I say something?" "You may." Charles folded his hands. "I spent 40 years as a public school superintendent." Olivia listened. "I used to tell new teachers something." He smiled sadly. "You can learn more about a school from how it treats the quiet kid than from any mission statement hanging on a wall." Olivia nodded slowly. "That's true." Charles looked toward the galley. "Same applies to companies." The words stayed between them. Simple, painfully accurate. Mission statements were easy. Posters were easy. Training videos were easy. Character was harder. Culture was harder. Culture revealed itself when nobody important was watching, or when people believed nobody important was watching. Rachel Coleman had lowered her phone long ago. Now she spoke for the first time. "Ms. Bennett." Olivia turned. Rachel hesitated. "I was recording. I know. I wasn't recording because you were the CEO." Olivia studied her face. Rachel continued. "I was recording because what was happening was wrong." The cabin grew quiet again, not uncomfortable, reflective. Olivia felt something loosen inside her, a small thing, but important. Because Rachel had unknowingly answered the question that had kept Olivia awake for months. Would anyone speak up if the person being mistreated had no power? Charles had, Rachel had, not enough people. But some, and sometimes change starts with some. Olivia offered a faint smile. I'm glad you did. Rachel nodded. So am I. The aircraft leveled above the clouds. Sunlight broke through the gray. Bright gold flooded across the wing outside Olivia's window. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself to look beyond the incident. Beyond the embarrassment. Beyond the investigation she already knew was coming. Because this flight had confirmed something larger. The problem was real. The complaints were real. The pattern was real. And now nobody would be able to pretend otherwise. Far below them, Atlanta disappeared beneath the clouds. Ahead of them waited San Francisco. And waiting there, whether anyone on this aircraft realized it yet or not, was a reckoning that would reach far beyond one captain, one flight attendant, or one seat in first class. The flight landed in San Francisco 4 minutes ahead of schedule, but nobody in first class felt early. The wheels touched the runway with a hard whisper of rubber against pavement. A few passengers reached for their phones before the seatbelt sign went dark. Others stayed still, as if standing too soon would break the fragile silence that had carried them across the country. Captain Whitaker's voice came over the speaker during taxi. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco. We appreciate you choosing North Star Airways. The words were smooth, professional, empty. Olivia heard the training in them. She had approved that script years ago. Back then, it had sounded warm on paper. Now it sounded like a curtain being pulled over a cracked wall. Diane Parker stood near the forward galley, preparing for arrival. Her lipstick had been reapplied. Her hair was still pinned tight. But her eyes gave her away. They kept moving toward seat 2A, then away again, as if looking directly at Olivia might burn. When the aircraft stopped at the gate, the chime sounded. Seatbelts clicked open. The cabin came alive in pieces. Overhead bins opened. Bags scraped against plastic. Phones lit up. Voices returned in low, careful tones. Charles Morgan stood slowly, reaching for his worn leather bag. His knees bothered him. Olivia noticed. So did Rachel Coleman, who stepped back to give him room. Charles looked at Olivia. Miss Bennett. Mr. Morgan. He held his book against his chest. I meant what I said earlier. I know. My granddaughter wants to fly planes. His voice softened. She is 15, smart as a whip. But she already knows what rooms can do to a person before they say a word. Olivia's expression changed. Not much. Enough. What is her name? Lily. Olivia nodded. Tell Lily the sky is not reserved for anyone. And tell her North Star has a cadet program. I would be honored to make sure she has the information when the time comes. Charles swallowed. For a moment, he was not a retired superintendent, not a frequent flyer, not a witness. He was just a grandfather imagining a door opening for a child he loved. Thank you, he said. No, Olivia replied. Thank you for standing up when it would have been easier not to. He gave a small nod and walked toward the door. Rachel Coleman waited behind him, phone in hand, face composed. Ms. Bennett, she said. Ms. Coleman. Rachel was not surprised as Olivia remembered. People in power often remembered names when they wanted something. But this felt different. Precise. Respectful. I'll preserve the video, Rachel said. Chain of custody, original file, metadata, everything. Olivia looked at her carefully. You expected that I might need it. I expected the truth might. That answer stayed with Olivia. The truth might. Not the CEO, not the company. The truth. Olivia extended her hand. Rachel shook it. I would like my office to contact you, Olivia said. Not to bury this. To make sure it is handled correctly. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. Lawyers noticed phrasing. Handled correctly can mean a lot of things. It means independent review, Olivia said. It means no quiet settlement designed to make everyone comfortable. Rachel studied her another second. Then she nodded. I hope you mean that. I do. Rachel walked off the aircraft with the calm pace of someone already building a file in her mind. Olivia waited until first class had mostly cleared. She stood last. She took her tote from the overhead bin and tucked the leather portfolio beneath her arm. Diane was at the door. It was her job to say goodbye. She had said it to thousands of passengers, politely, Automatically, sometimes warmly, sometimes not. Now Olivia stopped in front of her. The jet bridge hummed beyond them. Diane's throat moved. "Have a good day, Miss Bennett." Olivia did not step away. "Miss Parker, you will receive a notice from Human Resources by close of business today. You will be placed on administrative leave pending an independent investigation." Diane's face went blank. Not shocked. Stripped. "Miss Bennett, Olivia raised one hand. Not harshly. Just enough. This is not only about what happened to me. That is important for you to understand." Diane's eyes shone, but no tears fell. "There is a pattern," Olivia said. "A pattern involving passengers who were questioned longer, treated colder, or made to feel as if dignity was something they had to earn before boarding." Diane looked down. Olivia's voice slowed. "I am not your problem, Miss Parker. I was never your problem. The problem is the part of you that decided, before you checked the facts, that I was one." Diane's lips trembled. No defense came, no policy, no script. Just silence. Olivia stepped into the jet bridge and did not look back. Outside the glass walls of the terminal, morning light spread across the runways. Behind her, one flight had ended. Ahead of her, the real work was about to begin. Olivia reached the arrival's curb, with the leather portfolio still tucked under her arm. The San Francisco air was cool and sharp. Cars moved in slow loops along the pickup lane. Drivers leaned against black sedans. Families hugged beside luggage carts. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed, bright and unaware, and the sound cut through Olivia more than she expected. Her chief of staff, Ethan Brooks, stood beside a dark town car. He was 36, former Navy logistics, neat suit, no wasted movement. He had worked for Olivia long enough to read the difference between anger and resolve. Today, she carried both. He opened the rear door. She got in. He slid in from the other side and closed the door behind him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The car pulled away from the curb. Finally, Ethan said, "How bad?" Olivia looked out the window at the terminal passing by. "As bad as we expected." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Worse? In some ways." He did not ask for comfort. He knew better. Olivia set the portfolio on her lap and opened it. Captain Thomas Whitaker made the final removal demand. He refused to verify dispatch. He threatened security. He stopped only after I showed him the review memo. Ethan took that in. "Diane Parker?" She started it. She held my boarding pass. She escalated it. She stood behind him and let him carry the authority while she supplied the assumption. The words were precise, almost clinical. But Ethan could hear the hurt beneath them. Not personal hurt, institutional hurt. The kind that comes when a leader sees the gap between what a company says and what it actually does. "Witnesses?" he asked. "Two strong ones. Rachel Coleman, civil rights attorney from Oakland." She recorded the exchange. "Charles Morgan, retired school superintendent." He objected on the record in the cabin. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Good people." "Yes," Olivia said. "And that matters. But it should not require good people to interrupt a bad system." The car merged into traffic. Rain streaked across the windows in thin silver lines. Olivia reached into her tote and pulled out a small notepad. She preferred paper when decisions mattered. First, Harold Mitchell. Ethan looked at her. "The older gentleman with the cane at gate B14? "Yes." Samuel Reed flagged him before he flagged me. "I want to know if Mr. Mitchell made the flight." Ethan's face changed slightly. He already suspected the answer. "If he did not, I want him found today. Personal call from me. First class rebooking at our cost. Ground transportation. Written apology with my signature. Not customer care. Mine. Done. Second, Samuel Reed, administrative review. Pull his last 8 months of passenger interactions. Complaints, escalations, secondary checks, everything." Ethan nodded. Third, Priya from the Atlanta lounge. Morning shift. She treated every passenger with the same warmth. I want her full name. I want guest services to know it. Recognition by end of day. For the first time, Ethan's expression softened. "You noticed that too. I noticed all of it." That was the burden of Olivia Bennett. She had trained herself to see systems in small gestures. A smile withheld. A question repeated. A kindness offered without performance. She saw the wound. She saw the remedy. And both stayed with her. Ethan opened his tablet. "I'll call legal." "No," Olivia said. He paused. "I want legal informed. Not leading." Ethan looked up. Olivia's voice hardened. We are not treating this like a liability problem. It is a trust problem, a culture problem, a human problem. The car fell quiet again. Outside, the city rose in pale glass and steel. Bring in an outside civil rights firm, Olivia continued. Not one already tied to us. Not one that wants future work enough to soften the findings. I want the firm that will tell us what we do not want to hear. Ethan typed quickly. Rachel Coleman's firm? Maybe. Meet with them but do not assume. I want options by tomorrow morning. Understood. Olivia closed the notepad. Then she said the thing Ethan had been waiting for. We go public first. He looked at her carefully. The board will panic. The board can panic on a conference call. Insurance will object. Insurance does not run my airline. The answer came fast. Flat, final. Ethan almost smiled, but stopped himself. Olivia leaned back against the seat. For a moment, the steel in her face softened and exhaustion showed through. I am tired, Ethan. I know. Not from today. I know. She looked out at the wet freeway. I am tired of people needing power before they receive basic respect. Ethan said nothing. There was nothing to add. Olivia picked up her phone. Schedule the board for this afternoon. Tell communications to draft nothing until I speak to them. No misunderstanding. No isolated incident. No vague apology. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead. We are going to say what happened. The town car moved north through the rain. Behind them, Flight 1142 was already being cleaned for its next departure. Ahead of them, Northstar Airways was about to learn that a company does not heal by hiding the bruise. It heals by finally looking at it. By mid-afternoon, the boardroom on the 32nd floor was full of people trying not to look afraid. The long glass table reflected their faces. Some were angry. Some were worried. A few were already calculating how much this could cost. Outside the windows, San Francisco sat under a hard white sky, bright enough to expose every fingerprint on the glass. Olivia stood at the head of the table. She had changed nothing since the flight. Same blazer, same cream blouse, same calm expression. That bothered them. They were used to crisis arriving loud, a shouting executive, a panicked communications team, lawyers rushing in with careful language. Olivia brought silence. Ethan Brooks stood near the wall with a tablet in his hand. The general counsel, Marlene Price, broke first. Olivia, before we say anything publicly, we need to consider exposure. Olivia looked at her. Exposure to what? Marlene blinked. Litigation, regulatory interest, labor claims, media escalation. We already have exposure, Olivia said. It happened in first class in front of passengers, on video. A board member named Frank Ellison leaned forward. He was 70, polished, careful, and deeply uncomfortable. Could we frame this as a misunderstanding while the review is ongoing? Olivia did not answer right away. She let the question sit in the room long enough for everyone to feel its shape. Then she said, no. Frank's mouth tightened. We have fiduciary obligations. Yes, Olivia said. And trust is an asset. No one moved, she continued. Passengers do not buy our seats because we own airplanes. They buy them because they believe we will get them where they are going safely, fairly, and with dignity. Once that belief is broken, the balance sheet is already damaged. Marlene folded her hands. I understand the principle. But words matter. They do, Olivia said. That is why we will not hide behind the wrong ones. Ethan tapped his tablet and sent the draft to the wall screen. The statement appeared in plain text. No branding flourish, no soft headline, just the facts. Northstar Airways confirms that on Flight 1142 from Atlanta to San Francisco, a passenger holding a valid first-class boarding pass was challenged repeatedly, denied proper verification, threatened with removal, and treated in a manner inconsistent with company standards and basic respect. The room went quiet. Someone at the far end whispered, "That is strong." Olivia turned. "It is accurate." The communications director, Paul Ramsey, cleared his throat. We normally avoid naming patterns before an investigation concludes. Olivia nodded. We will not assign final findings before the investigation. But we will acknowledge what is already documented. And the part about the passenger being you, Paul asked. It stays. Marlene's eyes sharpened. That will make the story bigger. It is already bigger, Olivia said. The only question is whether we are honest about why I was on that flight. Frank leaned back. The market may punish us. Olivia looked at him with an expression that was not unkind, but was cold. The market punishes uncertainty. Customers punish betrayal. Employees punish hypocrisy. We are going to reduce all three by telling the truth. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Ethan moved to the next section. Administrative leave for Captain Thomas Whitaker, lead flight attendant Diane Parker, and gate agent Samuel Reed. External investigation by an independent civil rights and workplace conduct firm. Review of all closed passenger discrimination complaints from the previous 3 years. Publication of anonymized complaint data within 90 days. Quarterly public updates. The boardroom changed as the words appeared. This was no longer damage control. It was a transformation plan. And transformation frightened people who had grown comfortable calling maintenance progress. Paul rubbed his forehead. Olivia, this will invite more complaints. Yes, she said. That could be overwhelming. It should be overwhelming, she replied. If people have been carrying these stories alone, the least we can do is be overwhelmed by the truth. Marlene looked down at her notes. For the first time that afternoon, she did not argue. A phone buzzed on the table, then another. Ethan checked his screen. Rachel Coleman's firm has sent the video through secure transfer. Cover letter included. They preserved the original file. Olivia nodded. Good. Confirm receipt. Tell them no one will contact Ms. Coleman directly except through counsel, unless she requests otherwise. Ethan typed. Frank stared at the screen. You are really going to release this before the video leaks? Olivia picked up her portfolio from the table. No, Frank. She looked around the room. We are going to release it because it happened. That ended the debate. Not because everyone agreed. Because everyone understood the decision had already been made by the woman who had sat in seat 2A and seen the company without its makeup. That evening, the final statement went out for legal review. Not softened, not sanitized, not comfortable. Outside, the sun dropped behind the city, turning the windows dark. For a moment, Olivia saw her reflection in the glass. A woman in a navy blazer, a CEO, a passenger, a witness. And behind that reflection, faint but clear, she saw the faces of everyone who had written to her company, hoping someone would finally believe them. The statement went live at 7 the next morning. Not at noon when companies usually try to bury bad news between market updates. Not late on a Friday. 7 o'clock Eastern. Clear daylight. North Star Airways placed it on its website, sent it to employees, posted it across its public channels, and forwarded it directly to aviation reporters who had covered the company for years. By 7:15, every major newsroom covering transportation had opened it. By 7:30, the phones at North Star's communications office were ringing without pause. Paul Ramsey stood in the crisis room with one hand pressed to his earpiece, listening to a producer from a national morning show. Yes, he said. The chief executive was the passenger. Yes, the airline is confirming that. No, we are not calling it a misunderstanding. Across the room, junior staffers looked at one another, as if they had just heard a forbidden word spoken out loud. Olivia stood near the window, reading the final employee bulletin on her phone. She had insisted staff receive it before the public narrative fully exploded. Not because employees deserved protection from consequences. Because they deserved clarity. Ethan entered with a folder. Harold Mitchell missed the flight. Olivia closed her eyes, only for a second. Then she opened them. Where is he now? Still in Atlanta. He was trying to get to Seattle for his daughter's surgery. The next available seat they offered him was tomorrow evening. Economy. Middle seat. The room seemed to narrow. Olivia turned fully toward Ethan. Call him now. Ethan already had the number pulled up. She took the phone and stepped into the smaller conference room. The glass door closed behind her, but everyone could still see her through the wall. She stood straight at first. Then, as the call connected, her shoulders softened. Mr. Mitchell, this is Olivia Bennett with North Star Airways. A pause. Yes, sir. The chief executive. Another pause. Her face changed. The people outside could not hear Harold Mitchell's voice, but they saw Olivia listen. Really listen. No interruption. No management tone. No careful corporate rhythm. Just a woman hearing a man describe how he had stood at a counter with a cane in his hand while other passengers boarded without him. When Olivia spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Mr. Mitchell, I am sorry. You should have been treated with respect. You should have made that flight. We failed you." In Atlanta, Harold Mitchell sat alone near gate B14 with a paper cup of coffee gone cold beside him. He was 71, retired postal worker, widower, a man who pressed his shirts before travel because his wife had always said dignity should be packed before anything else. He had not expected the call. At first, he did not trust it. Then Olivia asked about his daughter by name. He looked down at his hand. It trembled around the phone. "I just wanted to get there," he said. "I know," Olivia replied. "We are getting you there today." By noon, Harold Mitchell was on a non-stop flight to Seattle in first class, escorted through the airport by a North Star supervisor who had been instructed to carry his bag only if Harold wanted him to. His daughter received a call too, so she would know her father was coming. Olivia signed the apology herself. No template, no customer service language, just the truth. Meanwhile, the story spread. Rachel Coleman's video had not been posted publicly, but portions of North Star's statement were being read on television. Commentators were stunned less by the incident than by the company's decision to name it before anyone forced them to. Inside North Star, employees were reading the memo in break rooms, crew lounges, baggage offices, and gate counters across the country. Some were proud, some were defensive, some were afraid, and some cried quietly because for the first time, the company had put words to things they had seen for years, but had never known how to challenge. At the Atlanta Employee Lounge, Priya Nair was wiping down a coffee counter when her supervisor approached. "Priya?" She looked up, worried. "Yes?" "I just got off a call with guest services leadership. Your name came up." Her face tightened. "Did I do something wrong?" Her supervisor smiled. "No, you did something right." Priya blinked. "You treated a passenger with kindness yesterday morning." Apparently that passenger noticed. Priya did not know what to say. She had not known the woman was Olivia Bennett. That was the point. Kindness had not cost her anything. But now she understood. It had counted. Back in San Francisco, Olivia watched the first internal complaint portal numbers climb. Dozens, then hundreds. Ethan stood beside her. "This is going to get bigger." Olivia nodded. It already was. On the screen, another report came in. Another passenger, another story, another quiet wound that had finally found a place to speak. Olivia did not look away. Not this time. 3 weeks later, the investigation report landed on Olivia Bennett's desk before sunrise. The city outside her office was still dark. The glass reflected her face back at her, calm but tired. Ethan Brooks stood across from her, silent, holding a second copy in his hand. Olivia read every page, not the summary. Every page. There were witness statements from passengers. There was Rachel Coleman's video. There were system logs showing Olivia's boarding pass had scanned correctly. There were notes from dispatch confirming seat 2A belonged to her the entire time. Then came the older complaints. The grandmother in Detroit, the doctor in Houston, the veteran in Phoenix. Harold Mitchell at gate B14. Names, dates, routes, employees, patterns, not accidents, patterns. When Olivia finished, she closed the folder and rested her hand on top of it. "What are the recommendations?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. Olivia looked up. Termination for Thomas Whitaker and Diane Parker. Samuel Reed exits through a formal separation agreement, with retraining documentation placed in his record. Broader discipline review for supervisors who closed complaints without proper escalation. Ethan nodded slowly. And the reforms? All of them. By noon, North Star Airways announced the findings. No employee names were broadcast to the public, but the actions were clear. The captain and lead flight attendant from Flight 1142 were no longer with the airline. The gate agent was removed from customer-facing duties. A national review of passenger treatment had begun. Complaint data would be published every quarter. Training would no longer be a video clicked through in silence. It would be measured, audited, tested. For the first time in years, North Star employees understood that culture was not a slogan on a wall. It was a standard, and now it had consequences. The reaction was not simple. Some people praised Olivia. Some accused her of making the company look bad. Some employees felt exposed. Others felt seen. But the passengers began writing in. Not just complaints. Stories. Thank you for saying it. This happened to my father. This happened to me. I thought no one would believe us. Olivia read as many as she could. Some made her angry. Some made her quiet. A few made her cry after everyone had gone home. Months passed. The work became less public and more difficult. Meetings, data audits, policy rewrites, hard conversations with crews who felt accused, and passengers who had felt invisible. Olivia did not pretend the airline was healed because it had issued a statement. Healing was not a statement. Healing was repetition, doing the right thing again, and again, and again. 6 months after Flight 1142, Olivia boarded a North Star aircraft in Atlanta. This time, she did not hide her name. She stood near the forward door as passengers entered for the inaugural flight to Jackson, Mississippi, with continuing service toward the Delta region, where she had grown up. At the controls was Captain Lily Morgan. Charles Morgan's granddaughter was still too young to fly, but Lily's story had already reached her. This captain was another young woman from a North Star cadet pathway, one of the first graduates of the company's expanded foundation program. Olivia shook her hand before boarding began. Captain Morgan smiled, nervous and proud. "Mom, it is an honor." Olivia held her gaze. "No, it is a responsibility, and you earned it." The words settled between them like a blessing. Later, as the plane climbed through a clear blue morning, Olivia looked out the window. Below her, the land stretched wide and green, stitched with roads, towns, and fields. She thought of her father's hands on an old engine, her mother's books from the county library, Harold Mitchell reaching his daughter in time, Charles standing up in the aisle, Rachel protecting the truth, Priya offering kindness without knowing anyone important was watching. And she thought of Seat 2A, not as a place of humiliation anymore, as a place where a company had been forced to see itself. Olivia did not feel victorious. She felt responsible. That was the weight of real power. Not to crush people, not to win a moment, but to make sure the next person does not have to survive the same harm just to be respected. So here is the question worth carrying with you. If you had been in that cabin before anyone knew who Olivia Bennett was, what would you have done? Would you have looked away? Would you have recorded? Or would you have stood up? Because sometimes justice begins before the powerful reveal themselves. Sometimes it begins with an ordinary person deciding that silence is too expensive. And if this story made you think of someone who deserves to be seen, heard, or believed, share it with them. Then tell me in the comments what you would have done in that cabin. Your answer may matter more than you think.